This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
It is a massive sports weekend. We have the PGA Championship. We got the Preakness Stakes. We've got a lot of other stuff on tap for this weekend as well. We're going to talk the Preakness. So today, we're going to break down a big heavyweight title match between Tyson Fury and Oleksandr Usyk with Gabriel Santiago. We're going to talk the final week in the EPL and all the craziness that could go down on Sunday. And we'll talk NASCAR's All-Star race in North Wilkesboro. Let you know where to find value for this weekend over at FanDuel Sportsbook. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research. Joined here to kick things off by Gabriel Santiago. You can find him on Twitter at GPS_on the mic. He is a writer for us over at FanDuel Research. We're going to break down this Fury versus Usyk match. Gabriel, it's a pleasure to have you on the show for today. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well over here on the West Coast. It's a little early, but you know, we're here on a Friday. Like you said, it's a great sports weekend ahead. So not only the fight, even though I'm looking forward to that a lot, I'm looking forward to a ton of action this weekend. Happy to be here with you, Jim.
Is the fight number one on your list for this weekend as far as viewing rankings for you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's some other good NBA playoff action going on. Like you mentioned, we have plenty of golf. We have some NASCAR going on. We're also at that interesting spot on the MLB calendar where some of these teams are beginning to take shape. But given everything surrounding this specific heavyweight bout, the fact that we're going for undisputed, yeah, I think this is what I'm most excited for this weekend.
I think the true heavyweight bout is between Kyle Harrison and Ryan Feltner for tonight. I think that's the true heavyweight bout for this weekend. I kind of wanted the under in that game, but couldn't see value at 7.5. So I wanted exposure, like what Harrison's been doing, like Feltner too. So couldn't quite get there, but the true heavyweight bout is obviously in San Francisco for tonight between the Rockies and the Giants. We'll break down Fury versus Usyk here with Gabriel in just 1 second. Then we'll talk to Austan Kas about the final week in the EPL, and I'll talk NASCAR in North Wilkesboro all in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it may be. Just search for Covering the Spread, leave us a 5-star rating and review, and hit subscribe as always. The second leg of horse racing's Big Three is here, and FanDuel is the best place to bet the Preakness Stakes because right now all customers can get a no-sweat Preakness bet up to $20. That means you get up to $20 back if your win bet does not win. So, bet the Preakness with America's #1 sportsbook. Just visit FanDuel today for your chance at a no-sweat Preakness bet up to $20. Must be 21 plus and in select states only. Offer valid on first Derby win wager. Verified FanDuel racing account required. Refund issued in non-withdrawable racing site credit that expires on 6/10/24. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, DC, Iowa, Kentucky, Michigan, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, Virginia, and Vermont. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghealth.org in Maryland. 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Gabe, we'll break down Saturday's fight here in a second. But first, let's get a read on your process. This is your first time here on the show. What steps do you take before you bet a boxing match?
Yeah, boxing can be a little bit of a delicate approach, especially when dealing with the heavyweights. So first things first, again, with men so large, you really want to take a look at the tail of the tape. Start simply. In this match here, obviously, with Fury and Usyk, we're going to see a little bit of some varying measurements, we should say. So really, off the bat, that's something I like to get out of the way. Then kind of another good way to tap into is record against common opponent. Now, of course, in boxing, they say styles make fights. So obviously, there's going to be some room for discrepancy there. One fighter may look one way against another opponent, whereas taking that same fighter against the same mutual opponent could look entirely different. But still, again, in the heavyweights, it can be kind of a good way to just get your judgment grounded. And then from there, you obviously want to see how they've done recently. So obviously with Fury, his last fight wasn't exactly your traditional boxing bout. He decided to, in a way, it kind of pushed back this fight here with Usyk. He decided to go at it with Ngannou. However serious or not, we can say Fury took that is really up for debate. But obviously it wasn't Tyson's greatest showing, whereas Usyk, the last few times he's been in the ring, he's looked particularly sharp. So it's all kind of things you want to just take into I want to say a conglomerate thought, and just kind of use that as a base of grounding to, I guess, let things go from there. Again, you always want to see what that recent track record is looking like and apply it going forward.
And it's tough too, because it's such small samples in boxing where you're getting, a fight a year, whatever it may be on these guys. So inherently limited samples when trying to draw from that. So I feel like the eye test probably plays a larger role in boxing than it may in other sports. Do you agree with that or no?
I think it definitely can, because again, there's so much that goes into the craft of boxing. Like, one way that someone explained it to me once, and I have a ton of respect for UFC fighters and the things they go through to get to that level, but the one difference, a difference that someone once described to me between boxing and UFC is that a lot of these top UFC fighters, you can have perhaps maybe one weakness in your game somewhere along the lines, whether it's possibly in your stand-up, possibly in your grappling, somewhere else in your skill set. Whereas in boxing, the guys that get to this championship level, you really can't have any holes in your game. However, when you go over to the heavyweight department, things can get a little testy. Sometimes the guys that have the biggest, baddest brute strength and size, sometimes that will make up for a lot. We saw Deontay Wilder have a pretty successful career in the ring, just dropping guys with that right hand. However, when we saw that contrasted against someone with Fury, who has the size and the skills to go up against them, it was a pretty interesting fight. And then through the trilogy, we obviously saw Fury able to separate himself. There was one note I forgot on the process I like, especially with heavyweights. You really want to look at their finishing rate. Here we see with Usyk and Fury, for heavyweights, their finishing rates aren't very high. Usyk is at 66.6 of a KO rate, and then Fury is just above 70% for a KO rate. Again, for heavyweights, that's not particularly high. Conversely, neither of these guys have ever been knocked out before. So that's another way I got to my method of probably not counting on this fight ending in a knockout.
Okay. A little foreshadowing there. I like that for sure. Now, we'll talk about the markets around this match in a second, but I want to get your overall view of Tyson Fury versus Oleksandr Usyk, because you mentioned styles make fights. So what can we expect in this fight?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. And honestly, I'm eager to see exactly what we're going to get, just because I think Usyk's ring skills are so supreme. Whether when he was at cruiserweight, obviously he was able to get to undisputed cruiserweight status. And even here at heavyweight, we've seen Usyk chop down men much bigger than him. So I'm really going to be looking at his ring generalship and how he handles his spacing from the much larger Tyson Fury. But again, when Tyson Fury's in good shape and when he's motivated and when he's got a goal, like we've seen him in those Wilder fights, he can be like a freight train coming down the tracks. There's really no answer for it. So if Fury, does his due diligence, and if he's in good shape, I expect him to be coming downhill on Usyk and maybe reducing the distance between the two of them. But the way Usyk, the way his feet work is, the way he's got that gamerness to him. So looking a little bit, it's going to be, I think the spacing is going to be huge. It's going to be key.
So it sounds like you see a tight fight, and FanDuel Sportsbook sees the exact same, because right now over at FanDuel, Tyson Fury's money line is -126. Usyk is at +104. When you look at the more traditional markets, Gabriel, where do you see value there?
Yeah, so already looking up the money lines, we have seen some shifting there. With lines that close, it's you can really make an argument either way. So I think to get true value out of this fight, I really think you have to go into the method of victory category. And for me, I think the best bet, considering what the odds are, I really like Usyk to finish this one. I shouldn't say finish this one. I like Usyk to win by decision or by points. Now, earlier in the week, we were getting that at 190, and as it is now, it looks like that's gone to 2-1 odds. So a little bit of increase there. And since I've authored the Usyk Tyson fight preview from earlier in this week, as I mentioned, we have seen a little bit of movement. But as it is now, I like Usyk at 2-1 to win by decision.
And what puts you on that? Is it really coming down to the fact, like you said before, that neither guy has been finished before, and therefore you expect this fight to go the distance?
Yeah, I think that is a lot of it with these specific fighters here. Again, we'll see heavyweights a lot of times. They have 95% KO rate, and that's great and definitely sells pay-per-view tickets. But with these heavyweights specifically, they don't knock guys out at that alarming rate. And like you just said, neither of these guys have ever been knocked out. Of course, we've seen Tyson Fury hit the canvas. The rest is history. You know, I've never seen anyone get up from what looked like a complete state of unconscious like that when he rose from the dead against Wilder. So even keeping that in mind, I really, really find it tough to have this one ending before all 12 rounds are completed. You know, crazier things have happened, but I think right now at FanDuel to go the distance, yes is at 196 and no is at plus 152. So I don't really see value necessarily in that specific segment. So when I couple it together with Usyk, also who I like to win, then I think it's probably best to go with him to win after all 12s are complete, either by points or decision at 2-1 odds.
Okay, so that is, again, as you mentioned, 2-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook in the method of victory section. Usyk by points or decision there. Moneyline and its length on Usyk to Usyk to plus 104. How long would that need to get before you consider taking the money line versus that method of victory? Are we talking plus 110, plus 115, somewhere in there if we see some late movement in Fury's favor?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really getting to that point because we've already seen it move quite a bit. I think plus 110 is already a good point for Usyk's, or a good buy point, I should say, for Usyk's money line. Because on Monday we had it at Fury was actually a slight underdog at minus 108 on the money line, and then Usyk was at plus 114 favorite. As it is now, it has shifted a little bit, and we see Fury as the odds-on favorite. So I think, yeah, if it continues to go in that direction, I certainly would agree that there is value on Usyk just to win outright.
Okay, so right now liking Usyk by points or decision 2-1, keeping eyes on that Usyk money line. Plus 104 right now, but if it gets a little bit longer, maybe consider looking there as well. But we have a lot of props on this bout as well, Gabe. So when you look at the prop section for this fight, any value stand out to you there?
Yeah, so there was one I found under the special section. So I really liked one, and it was an interesting prop here. I believe it was to be okay, so for either fighter to score a knockdown between rounds 1 and 6. So obviously that cuts our fight in half. We're only looking at the very first half of the fight here. And although I am confident that the fight won't end in a knockout, that doesn't mean that we won't see somebody either catch somebody on a bad angle or, let's say, at the right time, to where if you get him at that just moment, you might get him to drop either to a knee or just something to where we could possibly score it as a knockdown. So I think at the price I saw it at plus 190 could be enticing there. Or no, sorry. That was my previous one. This one was looking at in the neighborhood of plus 330. So got something over in the neighborhood to triple your money in that category. Whereas some of these others I think are just asking for a little bit too much. You know, you have these combination props and whatnot. Yeah.
That's under the specials
tab. For the sake
of
getting too cute.
Yeah, definitely. And that's always the risk is getting too cute, getting too many stipulations in there for sure. So that's under the specials tab at FanDuel Sportsbook. The featured section, a knockdown in any of rounds 1 through 6. That is plus 310 at FanDuel Sportsbook. But it sounds like, Gabe, if you're making one bet on this fight, it's going to be that Usyk by points or decision. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Again, unless we see that line sort of cascade in the way that it has been, to where Fury just continues and continues. And we are seeing a fair bit of public support for him. So that definitely makes sense that we're seeing the price for Fury inflate. Could get to it from Usyk, but yeah, as it is now, I really like him to win by decision or points. And hey, man, this could be a heavyweight fight of the generation. So I'm excited for it. And I'm excited it's finally happening, because we know with boxing, sometimes these mega fights never come to fruition.
Yeah.
We're getting it at a good spot. I think both fighters, you know, we're about age 35, 37. A little older, but if you've seen them, these guys are still fighting pretty well, and I think they're going to give us a great product in Saudi Arabia this weekend.
Well, I'm glad you get to see it. I'm glad you get to break it all down. I'm excited that we got to have you on the show here for today. That is Gabriel Santiago. Check him out on Twitter at GPS_on the mic, and check out his work over at FanDuel Research as well. Gabe, appreciate the time. Good luck to you with the fight. Enjoy, and we'll talk to you again, hopefully here in the very near future.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate you having me on. Have a great day, guys.
Alrighty, same to you. And again, find Gabe on Twitter at GPS_on the mic to get at his work, and then find his writing over at FanDuel Research as well for that Fury versus Usyk match. other matches on the table for this week as well, though, because it is the final week in the EPL. And from what I've heard, that is a chaotic kind of table. So we're going to bring on Austan Kas for today to break down EPL match week 38, where they have all of these matches going at the same time. You can find Austin on Twitter at Austan Kas. Find his work at FanDuel Research, where he is a senior editor. Austin, it is a delight to have you on the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jim. How are you?
I am doing very well. Excited about this because from what you've told me about this final week in the EPL, it sounds like it's just pure chaos from start to finish.
It's really fun. I think it's the closest thing soccer has to the Sunday afternoon of NFL Red Zone, where so many games are happening at the same time. And we're going to get into it. There's not as much on the line as there is sometimes, which, that always adds some elements to it. But yeah, it's a really fun day. It's a really great day for daily fantasy as well as betting. So I'm very excited.
All right, so let's get you prepared for that Sunday by talking about what's on the line for the EPL this weekend. And as you mentioned, not as much on the line. It seems like the title's pretty much wrapped up with Man City going to claim that. You had mentioned them mid-season as a team you wanted to buy into. That came to fruition. So that part's probably off the table. Any bigger things at stake across Sunday's matches, though, Austin?
Not really. It's kind of a weird year where that's not really the case. The title's pretty much the only important thing yet to be decided. The top four is locked in, with Aston Villa getting fourth, so they'll be in the Champions League next year. Relegation is pretty much sealed too, barring Luton Town winning, Nottingham Forest losing, and there being enough of a swing in the goal differential to overturn Forest's 12-goal advantage over Luton in goal difference. So yeah, it's pretty much just the title race. All Man City need to do is win at home against West Ham. They're minus 11,000 to do that. If City lose or tie, Arsenal can jump them with a win. Arsenal are minus 600 to win. Odds are both of them win on Sunday, and City would clinch a fourth straight Premier League title, something that's never happened before. But it's sports. You never know. 2 years ago, I think, City was in a very similar position to this at home against Aston Villa, got down 2-0 in the first half, and then came back to win. So I'm selfishly hoping from an entertainment perspective that West Ham find a way to score first, but I'm not counting on that.
Let's go West Ham, baby. Let's get some chaos across the Sunday. Okay, Austin, we have 10 matches on Sunday. Let's start things off with the traditional markets. Where are you seeing value there at FanDuel Sportsbook?
So my favorite bet of this weekend by far is Crystal Palace to win at minus 125 against Aston Villa. At first glance, I think this line might seem a little odd to people. Palace are 12th in the table. Villa are 4th. As I just mentioned, Villa clinched a Champions League spot, which is an incredible achievement for them. But I think this should actually be closer to like minus 135, minus 140. It was actually minus 120 an hour ago when I looked this up. So it's moving that way. I think there's two big factors, kind of one that, I guess two things they mesh together, so maybe just one, but it's motivation and circumstance. Tottenham losing on Tuesday night locked in Villa to the Champions League. That's been their aim all year. They achieved it. So I think the human element might come into play where they have been pushing so hard to get this, and it's over. They've crossed the finish line. They might put out a weekend starting lineup. They also just don't have anything to play for in this game. Aside from that narrative type of stuff, which I think is very valid, especially in the last game of the season, there's definitely a numbers-based case for backing Palace, even if Villa were playing their best starting lineup. As we've talked about on here previously, Villa's been in the Europa Conference League this year, and it's really wiped them out. They've allowed at least 1.4 expected goals in 16 straight matches per FBref's XG model. They've only won the expected goal battle twice in their last 10 league games, so they've really limped home here. One of those two came last Monday night in a home game against Liverpool, where Villa rallied late for a draw. They were down 3-1, scored 2 goals in the last 10 minutes to tie 3-3. But I think that probably ran their gas tank all the way to E. And then you can also add in that they played Monday. Crystal Palace's last game was Saturday, so Palace has the rest advantage as well. And then lastly, Palace have been playing very well. Eze and Olise, two of their best players, are back healthy. They are borderline relegation candidates without them. With them, they're probably safely top half of the table. Those two are really special players. They're going to have a hard time holding on to them this summer. They've won 5 of their last 6 matches. The only exception was a tie. They've beaten Liverpool at Anfield, Newcastle and Manchester United in that span. They scored 13 goals over their last 4 home matches. 3 of those matches were Man City, Newcastle, and Manchester United. So Palace are playing really well. And I just feel like I talked forever there. But there's a lot of things pointing toward Crystal Palace to win in my eyes. So I like this minus 125 number.
Well, they've gone from our arch nemesis to suddenly our savior, I guess, because I feel like there have been a lot of times this year where, especially when those 2 guys were banged up, we were betting against Crystal Palace, whether it be with like over on goals and stuff like that. But they have gotten through. You mentioned the sacking of their manager may have catalyzed this team to really turn things around. So if we can finish things on a high note and get some redemption for Crystal Palace in our eyes, I'm going to take that, man. Sounds great.
Yeah, they've been really good lately. And then their manager has done a great job. I think he's benefited from having his 2 best players healthy, which is something that hasn't been the case for much of the season, but he's doing a really good job. And I think there's a better chance they put out a very good lineup because they're playing at home. And typically I think clubs want to kind of do a nice send off in front of their fans. I think that Villa probably just had a few days of big celebrations and might put out a very weakened lineup, and that this line could really shift once lineups come out at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning.
All right, so hangover narrative in play here with Aston Villa putting us on Crystal Palace on the money line, minus 125. 9 other matches, Austin. Any other traditional markets where you see value this weekend?
So I'm going to go with Tottenham at Sheffield United, and I think this might be a new market for me on here. It's a little bit funky, but it's going to be Tottenham to go over 1.5 first half goals, which you can find in the goals tab. And it's going to be the away team first half over under 1.5. Tottenham's plus 164 there. I think there's a few reasons that they could have a really big day. I've really enjoyed watching Tottenham. We've talked about them a few times this year. You know what you're going to get with them, regardless of who they're playing, where the game is, whatever situation you want to come up with, they're going to attack. On Tuesday against Man City, they really opened up and attacked them for as much as they could, which ended up being about 55 minutes. It's really noble and admirable the way they play, but it also gets them into trouble sometimes. But in this matchup against Sheffield United, I really worry for Sheffield United here. They're already relegated. Statistically, they're the worst defensive team in the history of the Premier League. They've given up 101 goals in 37 matches. It's been bad. Their saving grace could be that Tottenham's eliminated from the top 4 chase and could put out a weakened team, but I'm kind of thinking that the way Tottenham has finished the year might actually be the total 180 there and could lead to Tottenham coming out with a vengeance on Sunday. And given how their manager, Ange Postecoglou, has been talking lately in press conferences, I think Tottenham might be out for blood here on Sunday, and if they are, it could get ugly very quickly. Tottenham are minus 142 to go over 2.5 goals for the game. That's definitely the safer route to play. But if I'm right about Tottenham putting out their best lineup and wanting to finish on a high note and maybe take some frustration out on Sheffield United, I like the idea of shooting for a little bigger number here at plus 164 and taking them to score twice in the first half.
I'm sorry, did you say Sheffield United is the worst defense in EPL history?
Yes, they have been. Yeah, it's pretty bad. I don't know if you remember way back to before the year, I talked about them, how they actually, after they got promoted last year, actually sold some of their better players, which typically teams that coming up do the total opposite of that.
Yeah.
And are buying players and overspending sometimes. Sheffield United did the opposite of that. There was a reason they were huge favorites to be relegated. And basically, at no point in the year did it seem like they would stay up. So, yeah, they've been really bad. I mean, 101 goals conceded in 37 matches. Like, you can do the math on what that is per game. It's over 2 a game. It's almost 3 a game. So, you give up 3 goals a game, you're going to have a hard time staying in the league.
Wow. That is fantastic. Well, the over-under for 1.5 first half goals for Tottenham, plus 164. The full game is, I think, like minus 360 or something like that. Or minus 500 or something like that for them to go over 1.5 goals. So I like the aggressiveness over 1.5 first half goals, plus 164 at FanDuel Sportsbook. That is in the Sheffield United versus Tottenham match. What about player props, Austin? What are you seeing as far as value there?
So I'm going to go right back to Palace. So if I feel so strongly about Palace, I think the market's underrating them a little bit team-wide, but I think it's also underrating them individually. So I'm going to go with Eberiche Eze to score or assist. That's been our staple market all year. We hit on it last weekend, thankfully, and I think we can do it again. I do want to stress that this week or this Sunday, more than any other Premier League day all season, it's crucial to wait and see the starting lineups. The final day is a little bit like the last week of the NFL regular season for teams that don't have much to play for. Sometimes that results in some really funky lineups. So I don't want anyone to get stuck with a player prop on a guy who ends up coming off the bench. But yeah, Old Faithful here. Eze to score or assist at -130. This was -120 last night. So it seems like the market in general is moving toward my feelings on Palace. Already ran through why I really like Palace, so I won't rehash all that stuff. But Eze, he's got 9 goals and 3 assists in 23 starts this season, and he really shines when Elise is healthy. Here lately, he's racked up 3 goals and 1 assist over Palace's last 5 matches, and he handles set-piece work as well. He takes free kicks and some corner kicks. Even with Elise back, they split corners kind of half and half when they're both back. And there's a chance that Eze's the Eagles' first-choice penalty taker. I'll be honest, I'm not sure who is their first-choice penalty taker because they've had so many injuries this year.
Yeah,
there just haven't been many times where Eze and Elise are both on the pitch at the same time and they get a penalty. But if Eze was to take a penalty, that would obviously be amazing for this market. But all in all, I think Palace score a couple, and I like Eze to contribute to a goal with either a goal or assist at this -130 number.
And you can parlay those two together. The Crystal Palace money line at -125 with Eberiche Eze to score or assist. Same game parlay there. FanDuel knows those two bets are heavily correlated. So you're getting +157 on that market, but could consider that. Sounds like probably better being separate bets just based on the fact that you're paying a heavy tax to the correlation on those two, but that is a consideration within this one as well. But overall, buying into Crystal Palace this weekend as a to score or assist -130. But as Austin mentioned, keep tabs in the starting lineup when that comes out, just because of all the wonkiness that comes with this week in the EPL. That is all that we have for Austin for today. Austin, it's been a pleasure talking EPL with you throughout the entire year. It's wild that it's already come to a close, but got some summer soccer coming up, and we can slide you on for that. We'll talk to Ed Fang about some summer soccer too. So we're not done with you, but I did want to thank you for the contributions across this entire EPL season.
Thanks for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
Alrighty. Again, find Austin on Twitter at Austan Kas. Check out his work over at FanDuel Research. Check out all the fantastic soccer writing over there. Final thing before we close up shop for this week here on Covering the Spread is it is All-Star Weekend for the NASCAR Cup Series. They're in North Wilkesboro for this year's All-Star race. $1 million on the line, going to first place. And there are a lot of unknowns this weekend. They've been in North Wilkesboro just once in the past 20 to 30 years, and that was last year. They have since paved the track. And North Wilkesboro's key trait, I would have said, was tire degradation. That typically wouldn't be as big of a factor for a newly repaved track, but they're going to run this like alternate tire on Sunday as part of the All-Star race to try to increase degradation. So there's a lot of unknowns. I have a model for this week. My level of trust in it is I'm not really sure. So I think if you're betting this All-Star race, you're doing so to have some fun. I do show some value on some guys, and we'll talk about them, but keep in mind, a lot more volatility for this week. So maybe cut down your typical bet size, things like that in order to safeguard yourself against some potential chaos for this weekend. But did want to talk about a couple of bets I like based on my model and based on just kind of looking at the markets at FanDuel for this week. And the first one is in the main event. I kind of like Denny Hamlin, 5-1. He is a favorite to win this race, and his implied odds are 16.7%, but I still have him as a value for this week. Denny is 20% to win for me based on a combination of factors where he is good on short flat tracks in general, and he's good at tracks with tire degradation, should that wind up mattering a lot with the alternate tire being in play. Hamlin runs well in Phoenix. He won Richmond earlier on this year, which is both a short flat and his tire degradation. And if things get really chaotic with this new tire, he did win Bristol too, which had massive levels of tire degradation. So Hamlin, 5-1 to win. You are betting the favorite in a race where I said there's a lot of chaos, but it is also a smaller field. And I mentioned 20% for Denny. that assumes the 3 best cars in the Open transfer to this race. That means that if we get a weaker driver to transfer from the Open, this number could go up for Hamlin before the green flag drops on Sunday. So Denny Hamlin plus 500 to win in the All-Star main event. I do think that is a good value and one I am willing to take for this weekend. Other bet for me is in the Open, where it's the drivers who have not yet qualified for the main events. Drivers who have not won a race either last year or this year trying to race their way in. Right now, FanDuel Sportsbook, Ty Gibbs is the shortest driver to advance. He's plus 250. I don't think he should be number one on this list. I think that honor should belong to Bubba Wallace, who's plus 550. Now, Wallace was plus 650 when I wrote up my betting guide for FanDuel Research yesterday. He's since shortened to plus 550, but he's still a value for me. That is 15.4% implied, and I have Bubba 21% to win the All-Star Open on Sunday night. Wallace has shown a lot of improvement on short flat tracks during his career at 23XI Racing. He's had a couple consecutive top 10s at New Hampshire. His form at Richmond has improved a ton the past 2 years, to the point where he's actually been pretty good the past 3 races at Richmond. And I think that gives you a lot of confidence in him entering this weekend. He's racing against a lower level of competition. You know, I think there are a lot of good drivers in this race. Chase Briscoe's here, Alex Bowman is here, Josh Berry, Noah Gragson on top of Ty Gibbs. But to me, Wallace should still be the favorite for this race, and he should be a pretty decent favorite at 21%. So he has shortened, but still see value in Bubba Wallace at plus 550 to win the All-Star Open. And I think he'd be somewhat competitive to win the main event too, should he advance. Pretty short there, only 200 laps. So might be tough to pass all those cars in that short of a time, but I do think Wallace is at least a dark horse if he were to advance to the main event. So 2 bets for me this NASCAR All-Star Weekend. Again, lowering your bet size typically if you decide to go along with these because of the uncertainty, but do like Denny Hamlin 5-1 to win the main event, and Bubba Wallace plus 550 to win the All-Star Open. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. Big thank you to both of our guests for today, Gabriel, Santiago, and Austan Kas. Find Gabe on Twitter at GPS_on the mic, and find Austan on Twitter at Austan Kas, and both of them you can find their work over at FanDuel Research. I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today and this week. Enjoy the weekend. Have a fantastic time watching all the great stuff on TV. We'll talk to you once again Monday. We're going to talk about the NFL schedule release and talk about biggest betting takeaways from that as things finally slow down from this week. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.